Well, it finally happened, ladies and gentlemen. LucasFilm talked about their plans for the next Star Wars movies at Celebration 2023. And since we got those announcements, we've had a lot more updates and reveals of new information. Some of this is coming from Kathleen Kennedy herself. Some of this is coming from the writers and directors. And then there was a huge article done from insiders at The Hollywood Reporter talking about what's really going on behind the scenes. There's some really good stuff in here, and there's also some really frustratingly bad par for the course Lucasfilm stuff in here. And in this video, we're going to break it all down. So smash a freaking like on this video and let's begin. Okay, so let's start with the big article in The Hollywood Reporter. And by the way, The Hollywood Reporter and the trades in general have been pretty nasty to Star Wars this week. This article itself talks about how the movies are mostly risk averse, and it goes into some crazy details about what producers are actually saying behind the scenes. And there was also a big article recently put out talking about how fans have turned on The Mandalorian Season 3. And the reason I bring this up is because it's interesting to watch the trades and a lot of journalists and other people on the YouTube space continue to talk about Star Wars as though we're very frustrated, despite Star Wars having a fantastic Star Wars celebration. I mean, I really do believe that they did a fantastic job of getting people excited about what's coming next for Star Wars. And yet, at this point, so many bad things have happened with Lucasfilm, we're still kind of looking at them side-eyed. But regardless of that, there are interesting updates in this article. I think the most important thing to bring up is the fact that the plan from Lucasfilm is to have the Rey movie out in 2025 and then follow that up with the Filoni movie in 2026. That is really interesting. We need to linger on that for a second. I mean, first of all, that debunks stuff that I was talking about in my last video. And there was this massive story that was spread all over the internet about how it was going to take 6 or 7 years from now for us to get the Filoni movie. That ended up being a misquote, or at least a quote from Kathleen Kennedy that was so vague that people took it in wrong ways. She had essentially said at the point when we see the movie, Dave will have done 6 to 7 years of storytelling with the different shows in the Mandalorian universe. People mistook that and thought she said it was going to be 6 to 7 years from now. So that's frankly good news. I want to see the Filoni movie a freaking sap. And I also think it's really interesting that Lucasfilm is positioning their next launch of movies to not just be like the Rey movie and then sometime later the Filoni movie, but it really does feel like they are putting both of these movies out in a very close time frame to try to just kind of get the excitement for the Filoni movie, to perhaps get fans that are skeptical of the Rey movie to give it a chance. So this is a really interesting update. Again, we knew that they were trying to fast track this Rey movie for 2025, but we didn't know what was going on with the Filoni movie, and it's crazy that they are going to try to get this movie out in 2026. Now, the other thing that's really focused on in this article is different things that people behind the scenes are saying about the project. They don't have a George, says one producer with knowledge of the Lucasfilm bureaucracy, referring to a singular creative figure guiding the franchise. Kathy is not George. Filoni is kind of the closest at this stage. The source uses the original trilogy as an example. Even though Irving Kershner helmed the 1980s Empire Strikes Back and Richard Marquand directed Return of the Jedi, both those movies still had a singular creative force in Lucas behind them. For an equivalent today, look no further than Lucasfilm's sister unit, Marvel Studios, which has Kevin Feige overseeing all creative aspects of both film and TV series. Now, when you combine that statement from producers behind the scene with some stuff that Jeff Snyder recently said about Dave Filoni, it appears that perhaps they are aware of this and they are trying to galvanize behind the creative vision of Dave Filoni. Jeff Snyder reported the day before Star Wars Celebration officially announced it that Dave was going to get his movie, but he also said in his podcast that Lucasfilm was looking to make him the new George Lucas, that they were going to try to take everything and craft it behind the creative vision of Dave Filoni, which I think would be an incredible win. But I also feel like this Rey movie may not actually be that thing. It is, of course, possible that Dave's going to have this oversight of that movie, and he was in the writer's room with Damon Lindelof when they first started even talking about this film. So again, his influence is likely going to carry through, but all of that stuff was for a script that Lucasfilm is no longer working on, and we're going to talk about the Rey movie a little bit later, but it would appear that they've got at least 6 more weeks before they even have a draft from Stephen Knight for that film. So the new draft of this movie might not have a lot of the Dave Filoni DNA in it. I also think it's pretty obvious that Kathy really wants Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy to have her take on this film, and Kathy's a big proponent of these female creatives getting to come in and not only make Star Wars, but really make their mark on Star Wars. That's a priority for her, and your mileage may vary on how you feel about that. But what I'm really saying here is that I find it unlikely that Kathleen Kennedy will give Dave Filoni this massive creative oversight in the way that Kevin Feige has when she wants to uplift the message and the personal brand of directors like Leslie Headland and Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. The last thing I want to talk about with regards to the Hollywood Reporter article was a quote by a producer saying, if they don't make at least that Rey movie, Lucasfilm will burn whatever goodwill it has left with this fan base. And oh man, that completely tracks with something else that Jeff Snyder said a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about how Disney has apparently told Kathleen Kennedy that if there's not a movie out in 2025, she will not have a job, which is pretty wild. That could also explain why Lucasfilm is seemingly developing the Rey movie and the Filoni movie at the same time, and perhaps this is to hedge the bets. So maybe if the Rey movie doesn't happen, if this script from Stephen Knight is horrible, maybe they just shift into the Filoni movie and try to fast track that even more to 2025. But either way, it seems that sources at Lucasfilm are telling Jeff Snyder that there's an incredible amount of pressure for them to get the movie out in 2025, and it seems like those same people are talking to the Hollywood Reporter and echoing that sentiment. There's massive pressure on Lucasfilm to make this movie in 2025. So now let's talk about some new reveals about the actual Rey movie, right? So many questions about this film. And again, Kathleen Kennedy has been out there answering questions. They've been talking about this. And so we've got some new info. First of all, Kathleen Kennedy said at Star Wars Celebration that they should have Stephen Knight's first draft of the script for this movie 6 weeks from Celebration. Here's what Kathleen Kennedy said here. We've been working on that film for a few years, and all of that feeds into our overall storytelling. We've just got to a point now where we've gotten a wonderful writer in Stephen Knight. He's come on board, and we're going to see a script probably in the next month and a half. We've been working on for quite a while, so we're getting close. Kennedy then went on to describe the moment of the idea of creating a Rey-centric sequel movie a eureka moment. She said here, there's never a time where something is just instantly suggested. It's such an evolution of conversations that we have all the time, and we knew coming off The Rise of Skywalker that we needed to take that further. We just didn't know how far out. We didn't know exactly what the story might be, but now we have a much better idea. And so the draft from Stephen Knight is a month and a half away, which is crazy, but it kind of lines up with him being hired just last month after they fired Damon Lindelof. And I don't think Kathy has spoken about the Damon Lindelof thing at all, but this is an interesting update. It literally means they still don't have a script for the movie they just announced that they want to have come out in 2 years. Here's what Kathleen Kennedy said here. She said, well, we're 15 years out from Rise of Skywalker, so we're post-war, post-First Order, and the Jedi are in disarray. There's a lot of discussion around who are the Jedi? What are they doing? What's the state of the galaxy? She's attempting to rebuild the Jedi Order based on the books, based on what she promised Luke, so that's where we're going. As for whether Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker could be involved, Kennedy said, I don't know if we'll spend a lot of time in flashbacks or on Force Ghosts or things like that, but certainly the spirit of what he represents to her is going to be significant. So that's kind of interesting, and I think a lot of fans would like to see Luke be involved in this movie in some way. It's an interesting answer from Kennedy, her saying that she doesn't know if we're going to do a flashback or if we're going to do Force Ghosts, but the spirit of what Luke represents is going to be significant. And she obviously did promise that she would continue the lessons of the Jedi to Luke. So interesting, right? Like maybe we get some Luke Skywalker in this movie as well. I personally think you're going to see Luke Skywalker in the Heir to the Empire movie by Dave Filoni. So maybe you're going to get a lot of Luke Skywalker in the next couple of Star Wars movies. I'd be up for that. Next up, I wanted to address this idea of the Rey movie being episode 10. That is definitely not the case. And Kathleen Kennedy has also clarified this. She said, when we say standalone now, a lot of the storytelling, as you can see in the work that we've been doing in television, we start it as a standalone idea and then it's grown. I think the potential of that could happen in these different areas of timeline, but I don't want to make a commitment to that until we're really getting into it and seeing how it plays out. This was asked to her because she referred to the movies as standalone, and that is just what it is. And I think what she's really saying here is you might see an episode 10 that will deal with what is set up in this next Rey movie, but they are not going to call it episode 10, and they are not building it up as a trilogy. I'm really curious as to what people think about that. I personally think that is a horrible idea, and they should do trilogies. It just evokes so much more interesting discussion. It shows you're committed to a massive 3-act structure of a story, although I guess we didn't get that with their other trilogy. I just think a trilogy is the way to go. It doesn't feel great to say these are all standalone, but if people really like them, maybe we'll expand on them. That to me feels a little bit like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But okay, let's talk about Dave Filoni's movie. And again, there's some crazy updates about this. I think the most significant update is that it's looking like Lucasfilm wants this movie out in 2026. And that to me really feels like we're about done with the Mandoverse on television. It's absolutely possible that we get a 4th season of The Mandalorian. It's possible we get a 2nd season of Ahsoka, but 2026 is 3 years away. And the process of writing this movie and making a movie that should be as epic as the Heir to the Empire movie or this culmination film that Filoni is working on is going to take time. I would absolutely hate to see Lucasfilm be like, Dave, why don't you make all these other series of television and then go make the movie real quick? They need to give him time to create an absolute incredible film that we all will want to see. We've also heard some leaks about how the Ahsoka show is going to end in its 1st season, and to me, it actually perfectly sets up the Heir to the Empire movie, so we'll just see. Maybe there's some more seasons of television, but regardless, huge update in the fact that you're going to see this movie way sooner than we thought. Now, the other thing that's really interesting about this is Jon Favreau's involvement in the project. There was nothing official from Lucasfilm attaching Favreau to the Filoni movie, but in various interviews, both John and Dave talk about how they're still partnered up and they will be working together on this Heir to the Empire or, whatever the Filoni movie is. Now, that's really good news. I'm a little hesitant to completely believe that right now because I believe the rumors that Jon Favreau has major beef with Kathleen Kennedy, and the way I see this season of The Mandalorian going down, I can actually see a lot of ways that Jon Favreau actually walks away from the show completely. His character was just killed off. The story seems to be going in a completely different direction. The next chapter in this shared story is basically just Filoni's project. And again, the movie appears to just be Dave's film. So I'm all for John sticking around in Star Wars. I think that would be fantastic, but I also just am not ready to 100% believe that that is the case. Either way, wanted to talk about it in this video because it is the fact that both of these men are talking about how they will both work together on that movie. And then finally, just minor updates to the Mangold movie, and this seems to be the movie that is the farthest away. It's probably also the movie that won't happen if things go crazy because, again, it's so far away. But I wanted to double down on my theory that this film is replacing Taika Waititi's movie. Now, I know Kathleen Kennedy came on stage and said that Taika Waititi is still working on his movie and he's still writing it, but that doesn't really even seem to line up with what Taika is saying. And Kathleen Kennedy was also caught in a massive lie when she talked about how there was never real development on the Kevin Feige Star Wars project. So basically, I don't believe what Kathleen Kennedy says, and I stand by all the stuff I brought up in my other update about this. However, another interesting thing happened where James Mangold liked a tweet from a Star Wars fan talking about how they were really excited that there was no Taika Waititi Star Wars movie at Celebration. And a lot of people brought this up because when you're a big figure and you like a post like that, people can see it and they share it around, and to my knowledge, he has not unliked the post. And again, that kind of just feels like this underhanded thing with him saying like, yeah, no Taika movie because I'm taking over that. And for the record, I would love for James Mangold to make that movie. It is incredibly intriguing the way it's described as this biblical epic, and I love that time period in the expanded universe lore, so I'm all for it. But it's kind of a shame that it seems to be the movie that's the furthest out, as James Mangold is apparently going to have to go work on a Bob Dylan biopic for Paramount before he begins doing this movie in any real earnest, and he also has that DC movie. So this really feels like a easy thing for Lucasfilm to announce, and also probably an easy thing for them to get away with it being shelved or delayed indefinitely if it doesn't work out. So there you have it, folks. Good and bad updates when it comes to the new Disney Star Wars movies. I'm cautiously optimistic and yet also terrified. Let me know how you're feeling in the comment section below. Smash a like on this video, and if you want to watch more, why not check out this huge video I just did talking all about the sequel trilogy characters and the absolute banana nut muffin craziness that I have heard about the Rey Star Wars movie.